Hey guys, tonight we wander into the shadowy corridors of attraction, where logic dies and desire grows like ivy through cracks in concrete. You're sitting across from her. She's radiant, expressive, intelligent. You've given her attention, praise, presence. But she looks past you toward the man who hasn't even noticed she's in the room. You smile, he yawns, she flinches. Then she follows him with her eyes like prey watching a predator walk away. You probably won't survive this, because what you're about to hear might undo years of well-meaning romantic advice. It might challenge your view of decency. But Machiavelli wasn't here to comfort kings. He was here to show them how power works beneath the velvet. And tonight, so are you. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is over there, whether you're in bed, on a couch, or staring into the void after another confusing date. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You've been taught that kindness wins, that attention nurtures connection, that love is reciprocal. But here's the first Machiavellian punch to your ribs. People don't desire what they already own. They crave what they can't touch. And women, especially high-value, self-aware women, do not worship predictable men. They worship the unpredictable disruption, the man who denies them psychological certainty. You walk into a room, quiet, unreadable. She notices. You don't acknowledge her, just enough eye contact to ignite curiosity, then nothing. She tries again. You're polite but distant, not cold, just elsewhere. She begins to lean in emotionally, wondering what you're thinking, what you're hiding, and why her usual charms are bouncing off your skin like raindrops off a rooftop. That's the forbidden magnetism of neglect. You don't insult her. You don't play games. You simply don't chase. And that act, in a world of men constantly orbiting women like moths around light bulbs, makes you an anomaly. There's a biological root to all this. Evolutionary psychologists point to a primal loop in the female brain, the interplay between dopamine anticipation and oxytocin bonding. When a man is emotionally erratic, here one moment, absent the next, he unconsciously spikes her dopamine. It's the same cycle that addicts experience in gambling. Unpredictable rewards wire deeper craving. It's not the presence that pulls her closer, it's the disruption. And here's your first quirky tidbit of the night. Female rats, when placed in a maze with male pheromones at one end, will pursue longer, faster, and with more persistence only when the scent is inconsistent. Predictability? Meh. But mystery? That's heroin. Back to you. You're not her enemy. You're not being cruel. You're simply not performing for her attention. And that triggers something ancient, something alchemical. You become an object of projection. Her mind, now starved of certainty, begins to script stories. You're probably deep or dangerous. Or poetic, or broken maybe. She wants to fix that. She needs to know more. But if you open up too soon, if you spill your intentions too easily, the worship collapses. Why? Because what she was worshiping was not you. It was the mystery you protected. Mainstream culture tells men to open up, to communicate more, to be emotionally available. And there's truth in that after the hook is set. But if you lead with softness, you become the therapist, the teddy bear, the late-night comfort call, not the king. And Machiavelli would remind you, it is much safer to be feared than loved if one must choose. Now don't mistake fear for actual intimidation. In attraction, fear is replaced by awe. Emotional distance that hints at depth, a powerful stillness. You're not feared because you threaten, you're feared because you don't need. That's rare, that's powerful, that's divine. That's rare, that's powerful, that's divine. Here's what most men do. They meet a beautiful woman and they offer everything. Laughter, affection, plans, validation. They think they're building connection, but what they're actually doing is kneeling, offering their crown before they're even seen as a throne. You must reverse this. You must become the man who is neither impressed nor indifferent, but unavailable in a way that creates hunger, like the moon, always there, but always just out of reach. And scholars still argue whether this behavior is born of manipulation or rooted in deep biological truth. Some say it's a trauma response, emotional avoidance triggering anxious attachers. Others say it's hardwired into the dance of masculine-feminine polarity, and the mystique is essential to seduction. You don't need to solve the debate. You only need to know that it works. You don't need to solve the debate. You only need to know that it works. In the Renaissance courts where Machiavelli wrote his masterwork, power wasn't loud. It was restrained. Kings didn't plead. They allowed others to speculate. And that's how attraction is built, not by offering answers, but by becoming a riddle. So the next time she leans in, don't rush to fill the space. Let her hang in the air a little. Let her wonder what you're not saying. And when she asks if you're okay, smile gently and say, "I'm always okay." Then say nothing more. Congratulations, you've just stepped off the stage and into her subconscious. You've been lied to about value, not in the economic sense, though that too, but in the emotional marketplace. You were taught that love is earned through effort, that attention is a gift women crave, that if you just give her more of yourself, more vulnerability, more compliments, more presence, she'll finally see you. But the hard truth is, attention is currency, and you're bleeding it like a fool at a casino who doesn't know when to stop placing bets. Every time you reply instantly to her message, you lose a coin. Every time you double text, wondering why she hasn't answered, you drop another. Every time you give her what she hasn't earned, your time, your reassurance, your vulnerability, you're spending emotional wealth without interest or return. And you know what happens when inflation hits? Your attention becomes worthless. That's why the men who ignore women aren't always cruel. Sometimes they're simply disciplined. Sometimes they understand a Machiavellian truth most modern men choke on. Power is not in what you give, it's in what you withhold. You think you're being kind by giving her all of you, but kindness is not attraction, it's comfort. She'll appreciate it, she'll thank you. And then she'll run off with the man who made her wait 3 hours before replying cool to her paragraph-long message. That guy, he's not necessarily smarter, but his instincts are closer to nature. He gives selectively, sparingly, and in doing so, he becomes rare. There's a study from Harvard Business School that revealed an unsettling fact. When someone is only occasionally responsive, they are perceived as more desirable than someone who is consistently available. The brain interprets inconsistency as importance. You lean in harder, you try to win their attention, you invest. And here's your quirky tidbit. Casinos pump oxygen into the air, dim the lights, and make exits hard to find, not just to confuse gamblers, but to increase anticipation. Your reward could be coming at any moment. That unpredictability keeps people locked in, wallets open, logic suspended. You do this too. You reward her unpredictably, and suddenly she's pulling the lever on your slot machine, praying for a hit. The Machiavellian man doesn't seduce by performance. He seduces by pacing. Now you're thinking, but if I withhold too much, won't she just walk away? Yes, the wrong ones will, and thank God for that. The women who demand constant attention, instant reply, constant reassurance, those are not feminine partners. They are addicts looking for an emotional fix, and you are the dealer. But the woman with depth, with pride, with an emotional world of her own, she'll feel your distance not as cruelty but as contrast. She'll feel her own heart beat louder in the silence between your texts. She'll start looking inward. Why do I want him more than I should? Why does this man affect me like this? That's when worship begins. And this is where Machiavelli would lean over your shoulder and whisper, "Make her chase the crown, then decide if she's queen enough to wear it." You, my friend, must become a man whose attention is sacred, not weaponized, not manipulated, but simply rare. Every time you rush to validate her beauty, you become background noise. Every time you pour your heart out without being asked, you become her emotional sponge, not her mystery. Every time you check in too often, you signal that she's the center of your emotional world, and suddenly you have no gravity of your own. Instead, try this. Next time she posts a thirst trap, say nothing. Next time she takes 2 hours to respond, take 6. Not out of revenge, not out of pettiness, but because your life is already full. And here's the scholarly debate. Is emotional unavailability a toxic defense mechanism or a powerful evolutionary filter? Some psychologists argue it's a trauma shield, men afraid of intimacy playing games to avoid being hurt. Others suggest it's an unconscious recalibration, a man reclaiming his value in a dating economy flooded with desperation. But the Machiavellian man isn't afraid of intimacy. He's simply not in a rush to give it. Your attention should feel like wine poured from an ancient bottle, not tap water gushing from the faucet. She must earn it, not through manipulation, but through reciprocity, through grace, through patience. And the moment she starts questioning, why isn't he trying harder, you've already won. Because now, you're not just a man, you're a standard. And women don't fall in love with availability. They fall in love with standards they have to rise to. So remember, every message you send, every compliment you offer, every minute you carve out is currency. Spend it with intent. You are not a faucet, you are a vault, and only the worthy should get the key. Let's get something straight. You don't need to be rich, you don't need to be 6'2", you don't need a yacht, a Rolex, or a jawline carved by Michelangelo. You need mystery. Because while every other man is out there posting gym selfies, triple tapping her stories, and crafting the perfect good morning text, the man who simply disappears after hello without apology or explanation is the one that haunts her. This is what I call the reverse gravity of mystery. You think presence attracts, and yes, to an extent it does, but overexposure dulls shine. A flame seen too long becomes just another light bulb. But vanish, pull back, and watch what happens. Curiosity fills the vacuum. Her mind begins spinning tales. Maybe you're with someone else. Maybe you're busy chasing your purpose. Maybe you're just not that into her. And that last thought? That one stings. That one grows. That one hooks. Because if a woman believes she can have you, she evaluates. But if she fears she can't, she obsesses. And here's the thing. You don't even have to do anything dramatic. Sometimes it's just a delay. You saw her text, you could reply, but you don't. You wait. A few hours. A day. And in that time, her imagination does more work than 1,000 love poems. There's an old experiment in behavioral psychology called the Zeigarnik effect. Humans remember incomplete tasks better than completed ones. Applied to attraction, if the emotional interaction with you feels unfinished, she replays it. She can't let go. She loops. Why didn't he finish the conversation? Why was he hot one minute, cool the next? What's he thinking? The Machiavellian man understands this. He doesn't always finish the scene. He leaves just enough undone to haunt. Here's your fringe tidbit. Some Renaissance artists would deliberately leave parts of a painting blurred or incomplete, not because they lacked skill, but because it provoked thought. An unfinished stroke invited interpretation. It made the viewer linger. You are the unfinished stroke. She's used to men pouring everything out by day 3. Backstories, intentions, playlists, childhood traumas. They serve their entire soul on a paper plate and wonder why she loses interest. But you give her a puzzle with one piece missing. Not enough to frustrate her, just enough to intrigue. And here's the twist. Mystery doesn't mean cold, it means controlled reveal. Think of yourself as a book with no back cover, no summary, no reviews. She has to open it to know what's inside. And every page she turns, that's a reward. So stop narrating your soul in her DMs, stop over-explaining, start using the most seductive sentence in any language. You'll see. It's a spell, a tension builder, a way of saying, I know what I'm about and I don't need your validation. Machiavelli would remind us, men in general judge more from appearances than from reality. All men have eyes, but few have the gift of penetration. In modern terms, people believe the image you present, so craft one that demands curiosity. Become the man who's not posting, who's not available, who seems to be living fully with or without her. And yes, it will drive the right women crazy. Now here's the debate. Philosophers have long argued whether mystery is manipulation or merely the natural order of attraction. Is it ethical to withhold information? Is it deceit to remain unreadable? But we must ask, is a lock manipulative, or does it simply require the right key? Mystery is not deception, it's discipline. It's refusing to strip naked on emotional demand. It's saying, earn my depth. That's the part most men miss. They confuse mystery with aloofness. But true masculine mystery is active restraint. Not cold, not cruel, just sovereign. You don't explain your whole past, you let her discover it in fragments. You don't reveal your plans, you show them through results. You don't broadcast your feelings, you let your actions suggest possibilities. And in a world where oversharing is currency, privacy is power. So next time you feel the urge to clarify yourself to her, to tell her exactly what you meant, what you want, where this is going, pause. Let the silence breathe. Let her wonder. Because she doesn't fall in love with certainty. She falls in love with the question. And the longer you remain a beautiful, unfinished sentence, the harder she will try to write the ending. There's something strange about the way women bond. Not with words, not with logic, not even with shared experience. They bond most intensely through emotional uncertainty. You've seen it. The guy who texts inconsistently, whose mood shifts like seasons, whose presence feels like a fleeting mirage, he is the one who owns her thoughts. While you, the stable, loving, affirming one, you become background noise, predictable, safe, boring. Let's not pretend this makes sense. It doesn't. It shouldn't. But it happens every day. Why? Because the feminine psyche, especially the emotionally attuned, self-aware feminine psyche, responds to contrast, to texture, and most of all to emotional scarcity. It's not that women want pain, it's that pain creates depth. It signals value. If your attention is always available, it signals no risk, no cost. And what has no cost has no value. The female brain is biologically and evolutionarily wired to detect patterns. It's a survival instinct. So when you break pattern, when you become unpredictable, unreadable, untamed, you trigger her deepest biological alerts, not fear, fascination. A 2005 study from the University of Virginia proved something fascinating. Women who were uncertain about how much a man liked them reported greater attraction than women who were told explicitly the man was interested. The unknown produced more desire than the known. She doesn't want the answer. She wants the riddle. And here's a fringe tidbit. In ancient courtship rituals among the Himba tribe of Namibia, a suitor would often disappear after first contact, not to ignore, but to test the woman's curiosity and emotional strength. Only when she inquired or followed did he continue the courtship. If she didn't, it ended. Desire was measured by reaction to distance. You today are no different. Because what you're learning isn't manipulation, it's strategy rooted in reality. He didn't believe in illusions of goodness, only in what works. This is where you, the modern man, must evolve. You think intimacy is built through confession, that if you share your fears, your plans, your triggers, she'll love you more. And maybe she will, but only after she's invested. Give her everything too soon and you rob her of earning your trust. You've skipped the trial, you've skipped the hunger. An attraction without hunger is like a fire built without oxygen. It sputters out. Instead, use emotional scarcity like seasoning, not to starve, but to flavor. She shouldn't feel abandoned. She should feel intrigued. She shouldn't feel rejected. She should feel pulled and paused and pulled again. Think about it this way. When a man reveals himself fully in the first few interactions, it's like pouring an entire bottle of perfume on someone's wrist. Overwhelming, no nuance, no allure, but a single drop behind the ear that lingers, that seduces. You are not a story that should be read in one sitting. You are a mystery that unfolds across chapters, each more elusive than the last. And scholars still debate whether this dance of detachment is a healthy form of relating or a deeply embedded power game between attachment styles. Some frame it as trauma bonding, others as evolutionary mating strategy, still others as modern dysfunction in a hyper-distracted world. But the result is undeniable. Men who master the balance of closeness and distance are desired longer, remembered deeper, and chased harder. You don't give nothing, that's stone, but you don't give everything, that's syrup. You give just enough warmth to inspire hope, just enough pause to ignite longing, just enough presence to feel real, and just enough silence to feel mythical. This is why the most devastating heartbreaks women carry aren't from the loud, emotional men who loved them endlessly, but from the silent ones who disappeared without a word. The ones who seemed to exist in their own orbit, who were kind yet unknowable, who cracked the door, then vanished. They were gods, not because they were perfect, but because they weren't fully grasped. So the next time you want to say more, reveal more, do more, pause. Let her do the work of wondering, of waiting, of reaching. Because the man who is too available becomes invisible, but the man who feels scarce becomes sacred. You don't need to raise your voice to be heard, not when you understand the Machiavellian art of silence. The man who knows how to stay still, how to leave space, hold tension, offer no apology for his calm detachment, is the man who holds power not with a sword, but with a smirk. We call this the silent stage of power, and it begins with restraint. You've probably been told that if you don't speak up, you'll be misunderstood. If you don't clarify, you'll be misread. That silence is weakness. But in attraction, in seduction, silence isn't a void, it's a mirror, one that reflects her own desire, her fears, her assumptions, and amplifies them. You don't speak because there's nothing to prove, and in your quiet, she hears her heartbeat louder. She tries to provoke you, silence. She tries to impress you, silence. She tries to get a rise out of you, jealousy, explanation, validation, still, silence. And now her mind is screaming, because the more she talks, the more you seem like the one in control. And it doesn't matter what you say, it's what you're not saying that drives her wild. Here's a mainstream psychological fact. Humans interpret emotional restraint as emotional strength. In other words, the less you react, the more powerful you appear. And when it comes to women, especially emotionally intelligent ones, the effect is multiplied. Why? Because women are emotional detectives. They are wired to read facial expressions, tones, subtext. Studies show women have far superior neurological wiring in the mirror neuron system, which governs empathy and emotion reading. So when you offer her less than what she expects, less validation, less confirmation, less reaction, you become a riddle wrapped in a silence she's evolutionarily wired to decode. Now, the fringe tidbit. In certain feudal Japanese courts, warriors were trained to hold complete stillness during interrogation. Not to protect state secrets, but because their silence forced the interrogator to reveal more. Power transferred not through defense, but through quiet. Machiavelli would have smiled at that. He believed a ruler's silence created fear, not trust. In relationships, you don't want fear, but you do want gravity. And gravity only forms when you stay rooted while the world orbits you. So how does this look in modern attraction? You're on a date. She asks, "What are you looking for?" Most men scramble to articulate something palatable. Someone kind, real, who likes to travel. You pause, hold eye contact, then simply say, "I'll know it when I feel it," and then shut up. Let her feel the silence. Let her fill it, because now you've just inverted the frame. She's now auditioning for your definition of what it feels like. Same goes for texting. She sends a risky message, flirty, suggestive, maybe even jealous. Don't rush to reward her. Don't pounce. Wait hours, a day, then reply with something cool, neutral. She'll spiral. She'll reread her own message like it's a code she miswrote. And here's where the scholarly debate rises. Psychologists argue whether this kind of silence is healthy detachment or veiled manipulation. Is it toxic stoicism or emotional leadership? It depends. If your silence is rooted in fear, fear of vulnerability, fear of confrontation, it becomes a shield. But if your silence is deliberate, calm, and grounded in sovereignty, it becomes a throne. Don't just say less. Be less reactive. That's what most men don't get. They think being high value means being loud, demonstrating worth, posting wins, impressing women. But true power isn't in performance. It's in stillness. It's not what you say that makes her weak in the knees. It's how little you need to say to make her wonder. It's how little you need to say to make her wonder. Because every woman has met a man who chased, who explained, who poured. But the man she remembers, the one she obsesses over, he didn't try. He watched, he listened. He said less than she hoped and just enough to make her crave more. And when she asked where he went, what he meant, why he pulled back, he simply smiled and said, "You'll figure me out one day." And she never did, because kings don't perform, they sit, and the world watches. Let's talk about obsession. Not the healthy kind, not the soft, candlelit version sold in pop songs. I mean the burning, irrational, chest-tightening kind. The kind that keeps her scrolling through old messages. That makes her rewatch your stories to look for clues. That turns your silence into a personal crisis. And here's the truth that no fairy tale wants to admit. Obsession requires an obstacle. You've never seen a woman obsess over a man who was fully available, emotionally naked, and constantly accessible. No, she obsesses over the man she can't quite grasp. The one whose affection drips like honey from a cracked jar, sweet, but never enough to satisfy. The moment you become easy to reach, you become easy to leave. That's the uncomfortable Machiavellian reality, and you don't have to like it. But if you want to stop being the backup plan, the maybe later, the emotional support man, then you have to become the obstacle. Not in cruelty, in value. You are not the aisle seat on a budget airline. You are the private jet, unavailable, luxurious, and only flown by invitation. This is rooted in basic psychology. Human beings are wired to assign value based on difficulty of acquisition. It's called the effort justification effect. The harder something is to attain, the more we convince ourselves it's worth the pain. Fraternities use hazing, cults use isolation, luxury brands use scarcity, and in relationships, men of value use boundaries. That means no instant access, no constant reassurance, no over-explaining. If she wants your emotional availability, let her earn it. If she wants your vulnerability, let her show loyalty first. If she wants to understand you better, let her be patient. Now, here's your quirky tidbit. In medieval times, knights would often be sent on absurdly dangerous quests, not because the mission mattered, but because the effort to return proved their worth. A man who bled, fought, and nearly died for the queen's token wasn't just impressive, he was worshipped. And that's how obsession works. You do not give her the prize on day one. You let her earn proximity to your emotional world. Because obsession is not about how much she likes you. It's about how much she suffers for the right to matter to you. Now pause, breathe, and ask yourself, have you been too easy? Have you made your attention cost nothing? Have you allowed your time, your body, your mind to be rented at emotional minimum wage? If so, no wonder she left. No wonder she's confused. No wonder she never worshipped you. Because without an obstacle, there is no mythology. And this is where Machiavelli enters the frame again, with his signature smirk. He reminds you that power isn't in being wanted, it's in being withheld just enough to be fought for. You must become work. Not in a toxic way, not by being manipulative or unpredictable just to cause pain, but by being rare, by having standards so high that her effort becomes a form of self-respect. She grows in pursuit of you. And here's the open debate. Some therapists argue this behavior triggers insecure attachments, creating a dopamine-fueled addiction rather than healthy connection. Others counter that in a world drowning in ease, challenge is the last aphrodisiac. They're both right, which is why you must wield this power with intention. You're not a game, you're a mission. You're not playing hard to get, you are hard to get, because you're busy building your empire, mastering your emotions, protecting your peace. You become the obstacle by becoming unshakably occupied with your own excellence. So when she texts, you don't reply instantly. Not because you're playing games, but because you're in the gym, in a meeting, in your zone. When she flirts, you don't fold. Not because you're cold, but because you're not moved by flattery. When she finally breaks, admitting she can't stop thinking about you, confessing that she's confused, haunted, pulled in, you don't gloat, you nod, because you knew all along, a man who stands still becomes the mountain she climbs. And every step she takes, that's the beginning of obsession. When a woman doesn't know what you're thinking, she starts imagining. And her imagination is a far more powerful seducer than anything you could say. This is the Machiavellian principle of projection, a psychological loophole that turns silence into seduction and absence into obsession. See, when you speak too soon, when you reveal too much, you rob her of the opportunity to write her own fantasy onto your blank canvas. You become concrete, fixed, known. But when you remain elusive, when you give her fragments, glimpses, tension without closure, she begins to fill in the gaps. And here's the twisted truth. The man she imagines is always better than the man who explains. You walk into a room and nod at her, just once. You smile, but don't linger. You leave before she expects you to. Now she's thinking, is he mysterious? Is he heartbroken? Is he emotionally unavailable or just emotionally disciplined? She builds a version of you in her head. One that fits her story, one that dances with her fantasy. And you, if you're smart, say nothing to correct her. This isn't deception. You're not lying. You're just choosing not to perform. Let's anchor this with a psychological concept, the idealization phase of romantic attraction. Early in courtship, humans tend to amplify the traits they hope the other person has and downplay the ones they fear. The less they know, the more they invent. And invention always favors fantasy over fact. This is why she can become addicted to a man who said almost nothing. Now here's your quirky tidbit. In Victorian England, women often fell madly in love with poets they'd never met, just from a single published line. Some would remain obsessed for years, refusing suitors who were very much alive and present, all for a ghost made of ink. And you can become that ghost, alive but unreadable. But here's where most men ruin it. They feel the tension, and then they talk. They break the fourth wall. They explain themselves, hoping she'll understand. Hoping she'll feel safe. But she doesn't want to feel safe yet. She wants to feel drawn in. And Machiavelli would say, never interrupt your enemy when he is making a mistake. In this case, your enemy is her curiosity, and the mistake is letting it cool down too quickly. So let it burn. She sends the "what are we" text. You reply, "Let's just see where this goes." She asks why you didn't call back. "I needed silence. Doesn't mean I wasn't thinking about you." She wants your secrets, your plans, your soul. You give her fragments, teasers, metaphors. You let her paint you in her favorite colors. Because here's the scholarly debate. Is projection a dangerous game that leads to disappointment? Or is it the very foundation of romance? Some say we never love others. We only love our own projections of them. Others argue that healthy love requires complete transparency. But transparency kills fantasy. And worship, my friend, is born of fantasy. So don't ruin it by becoming too real, too fast. Let her imagine your pain, your passions, your demons. Let her stare at the ocean and think of you. Let her lie in bed and wonder what you're doing and why you didn't tell her. Because the second she builds a story in which you are the unfinished chapter, she won't stop reading. You keep wondering why she lost interest. You were there, you showed up, you listened, you texted good morning. You sent flowers on Tuesday for no reason. You told her she was beautiful even when she barely looked at you. You think you were kind. But in her subconscious, you were too available. And that right there is the ego trap of availability. When you're always there, on call, on text, on command, you don't appear powerful, you appear expendable. She doesn't consciously think he's weak, no. Women are far too intuitive for such clunky thoughts. Instead, she just stops feeling it. Because the truth is brutal and simple, we don't value what we don't have to earn. Machiavelli understood this. He saw that people obeyed not out of affection, but out of scarcity. The king who mingled too freely among the peasants risked losing his crown, not because he was unworthy, but because he became too common. Now, in modern terms, the nice guy who's always available becomes emotionally cheap. And here's a real-world psychological anchor for this. In relationship studies, this is called the overinvestment effect. When one partner gives disproportionately more effort, time, or emotion than the other, the balance destabilizes. Attraction fades, emotional tension dies. Think of it like a seesaw. The more you lean in, the more she leans out. But let's not twist this. Kindness isn't the enemy. It's availability without friction that destroys tension. She has you too easily. You cancel plans to see her. You respond within seconds. You make her the center of your daily emotional routine. Here's your fringe tidbit. In early Hollywood, the biggest stars were never seen in public. Studios protected their mystique. The less you knew about them, the more you paid to see them. Once tabloids began showing them shopping in sweatpants, the box office numbers dropped. Now imagine what happens when you show up emotionally in sweatpants. The lesson? Don't let her see you too much. Don't let her feel like she owns you emotionally before she's earned that intimacy. Be generous, yes, but measured. Because availability should be a reward, not a default setting. This is why the guy who treats her like an afterthought, who occasionally cancels, who disappears for days without explanation, becomes the emotional addiction she can't break. Not because he's cruel, but because he makes her feel uncertain, and uncertainty activates desire. And here's where the scholarly debate continues. Some say these dynamics reflect unhealthy attachments, that playing hard to get manipulates trauma responses. Others argue that selective availability isn't manipulation, it's emotional leadership, it's boundary setting, it's demonstrating value. And Machiavelli would say, you do not disarm a woman by giving her everything. You disarm her by giving her almost everything, then leaving her to wonder what more you hold. So what's the solution? Stop being free. Make your time sacred. Let your replies take hours or days, not to play games, but because your life is full, because your world isn't empty without her. Because you are the prize. This doesn't mean being cold or distant forever. It means letting her earn access to your attention. You build that by not being available to every call, every message, every flirty invitation. You don't cancel plans. You don't rush to explain. Because when she finally earns your full attention, when you show up with presence, it will feel like a feast after famine. And that's when she begins to worship. Not because you manipulated her, but because you gave her something no man ever did, a standard to rise to. If you want to become unforgettable, you need to master one thing. Not charm, not good looks, not even money. You need detachment, the kind that walks into a room and doesn't need anyone to notice. The kind that listens without flinching, that leaves without explanation, that loves with depth, but walks away with grace when disrespected. Detachment is not aloofness, it's the king's cloak, the invisible fabric of power that makes you immune to chaos. And when a woman senses that you are detached, not because you're broken, but because you're whole, something primitive lights up in her. She may not understand it, she may not even like it, but she respects it. Because women don't worship men who beg for love. They worship the man who doesn't chase, doesn't flinch, doesn't need, but chooses. This is the paradox. The more you need her to stay, the less she wants to. The more you can let her go, the more she clings. And this isn't just poetic bravado, it's neurochemical. Detachment creates emotional safety for you and emotional tension for her. Detachment creates emotional safety for you and emotional tension for her. That tension is the crucible of desire. You become like fire behind glass, burning but untouchable. Let's ground this in a well-known psychological framework, intermittent reinforcement. It's the most addictive pattern in behavioral science. When rewards, like attention, affection, or validation, are given inconsistently, the brain produces more dopamine than it would from constant reward. It's the pattern slot machines use. It's the rhythm toxic exes use. And yes, it's the energy that the emotionally disciplined man projects naturally. He's warm, but not always available. He's engaged, but not eager. He shows up, but only on his own terms. You might be thinking, won't that push her away? Yes. It will push away the needy ones, the emotionally immature, the ones looking for immediate rescue. But the high-value woman, the one who respects herself, who's done the inner work, who's lived through the fakes and the flakes, she will lean in. Why? Because detachment filters. It separates the clingy from the curious, the entitled from the willing, the transactional from the devotional. Here's your quirky tidbit. In ancient Sparta, boys were taught from age 7 to hide their pain, their hunger, even their fear. Not to be numb, but to develop sovereign control over the self. One story tells of a boy who hid a fox under his tunic, letting it claw him to death rather than betray emotion. That's the extreme. You don't need to suffer in silence, but the lesson is this: real men bleed inward. They choose their expressions wisely. They don't weaponize silence, but they do use it to protect their peace. Now, Machiavelli wouldn't say be detached, he'd say appear detached. But we take it one step further. You don't fake detachment, you live it. Because when you actually need nothing, you begin to attract everything. Scholars still debate whether detachment is a form of spiritual maturity or emotional repression. Stoic philosophers saw it as power. Freudians saw it as trauma. Buddhists saw it as liberation. But for you, it becomes leverage. The more you detach, the less you chase. The less you chase, the more women chase you. And not just any women, but the kind who value depth, patience, and masculinity. So how do you cultivate it? You stop living for her reaction. You stop waiting for the ping of her message. You stop assigning your worth to her availability. You work, you train, you build your empire, brick by brick. And when she reaches out, when she flirts, when she wonders why you're not chasing, you smile. Not because you don't care, but because you've already chosen yourself. That, my friend, is the rarest form of power. A man who is present, but untouched. He can love fully, deeply, even obsessively, but never at the cost of his soul. And she knows it. She feels it in your silence, she sees it in your eyes, and when she finally stumbles into your orbit, aching for closeness, desperate for a glimpse behind the curtain, you hold her gently, but never tightly, because the king never clutches, he simply receives. Let's be clear on something most men tragically misunderstand. Withholding is not cruelty, it's contrast. You've been conditioned to believe that if you don't give a woman your full emotional attention, your time, your heart, your secrets, you're being cold. Or worse, manipulative. But contrast is not manipulation. Contrast is art. And the man who knows how to give sparingly, with rhythm, with poise, with subtlety, becomes unforgettable. Because here's what you must never forget. Women don't feel depth when everything is bright. They feel depth when the light shifts. Joy means nothing without silence. Warmth means nothing without chill. Presence means nothing without absence. If you hand her your soul on the first date, if you tell her all your fears, explain all your plans, say I love you before she's even yearned for your touch, you rob her of contrast. And the feminine nervous system is wired for contrast. She needs to feel your distance, your unavailability, your sovereign inner world, not to feel neglected, but to appreciate your presence when you do show up fully. You're not punishing her by withholding, you're painting in shadow. Even in music, the silence between the notes is what gives rhythm its power. It's not the sound alone, it's the pause. That pause is where feeling lives. In psychological terms, this plays on the principle of affective forecasting, a cognitive bias where humans overestimate the intensity and duration of future emotional states. When you pull back, she anticipates your return, and her brain floods with emotion before anything even happens. It's a neurological trick, a feature, not a bug. Now here's your fringe tidbit. In ancient Arabic poetry, the most beloved verses were those that ended in open imagery, unfinished, unresolved. The audience was left to wander in that emotional ambiguity. It wasn't seen as vague, it was seen as divine. Because not everything sacred is meant to be explained, and you become that verse. When you give her attention, let it feel intentional. When you offer praise, let it come rarely but deeply. When you touch her, don't grope, glide, linger, disappear. Let her feel the lack of you as much as the presence of you. Because the men who give everything, who write long paragraphs, who validate her every selfie, who plan every moment around her, these men feel loving at first, until the novelty collapses. Then she craves space. And the man who never gave space in the first place, he suffocates, he panics. He starts giving more in desperation, and she leaves. But the man of contrast, he gives, and then he disappears. He pulls her close, and then goes silent for days. Not to punish, not to manipulate, but because his life is full enough to carry that space. And when he returns, his presence feels like oxygen after smoke. Machiavelli might call it governing through contrast. You don't rule through brute force. You rule through emotional cadence, like a skilled conductor building suspense in a symphony. And yes, psychologists debate this. Some say contrast creates emotional unsteadiness that can trigger anxious attachments. Others say it is the very essence of polarity, the ancient masculine-feminine dance that creates erotic charge. But the one thing nobody can deny, it works. She doesn't fall for the man who gives her everything. She falls for the man who gives her just enough, and then walks away into the fog, leaving her wondering when the next taste will come. So here's your commandment. Do not pour, sprinkle, do not flood, drip. Let her mouth go dry with longing before you offer the next drop. And when you do, when you finally give her that glance, that text, that sentence, it will land like thunder because you gave her silence to feel it. Here's the part that stings. She must doubt to desire. It sounds cruel, doesn't it? But it's not cruelty, it's chemistry. The feminine mind does not fall in love with certainty. It falls in love with the question. When you make her sure, she thanks you. When you make her unsure, she chases you. That tension, the what does he feel, the is he mine, the why isn't he replying, that's where arousal is born. Not in her body, in her mind. You think women want reassurance? They don't. They want reassurance after tension. That's the key. Because reassurance without doubt is just noise. It's like feeding someone who's not hungry. They may chew out of politeness, but they won't crave. And craving is what makes her dream about you, check her phone, lie awake wondering. Because doubt is the gateway drug to desire. Let's anchor this with psychology. There's a concept called the intimacy paradox. The more we expose ourselves emotionally without earning, the less we're valued. Studies show that people appreciate affection more after emotional uncertainty than before it. In other words, Affection means more when she's not sure it's coming. They believed love was strengthened by uncertainty, and certainty was the death of longing. You've seen this in modern life. The woman who dismisses the guy who loves her openly, but breaks over the one who's 10% emotionally distant. Because that 10% is the space where her desire lives. Machiavelli would say, if you must be loved, ensure that it comes after fear. And in this case, fear means doubt. That beautiful, maddening unknowing. So you as a man must embrace it. You must learn to live in that silence. Don't rush to clarify. Don't rush to define the relationship. Don't rush to make her feel safe before she's even earned access to your inner world. Because safety without depth breeds boredom. But depth after uncertainty, that's worship. Here's what most men do wrong. She starts acting distant. He panics, he calls, he explains, he apologizes, he sends flowers and overtexts and spirals. She loses interest. He's shocked. What happened? She lost the tension. And once tension dies, desire dies with it. But you're different. When she doubts, you let her. You let her wonder where she stands, not to hurt her, but to activate her. Because feminine energy responds to the unknown. That's where her poetry comes from. That's where her obsession starts. You give her just enough warmth to keep her heart alive. Then you go quiet again. You flirt, then go dark. You open the door, then walk away. And suddenly she's not texting 3 guys anymore. She's thinking only of you. Because no one else gives her doubt and depth in equal measure. And yes, scholars will argue this. Some will say it's manipulative. Others will say it's instinct. Some will say love should be safe, immediate, certain. But love without mystery is friendship. And friendship for her does not ignite the fire. So let her doubt. Let her stare at your last message like it's a riddle. Let her wonder if you're thinking about her. And when she finally breaks the silence, when she reaches out with, "Are you still into this?" you smile. You say, "Depends." Are you? That's not a line, that's a throne. Because she didn't fall for your certainty. She fell for the man who made her wonder. It's not the compliments she remembers. It's the silence. It's not the "I miss you" text that haunts her at 2 a.m. It's the one you didn't send. The most potent form of seduction is not touch. It's not words. It's withdrawal. Because when you go quiet, when you step back, when you leave her emotionally mid-sentence, her mind ignites. She replays your last conversation. She scans your tone for clues. She wonders if she said too much or not enough. She checks your profile. She watches your stories. Not because you're gone, but because you left something unfinished. And that is the soft torture of emotional distance. Now let's be clear. This isn't about ghosting. This isn't passive-aggressive punishment. It's not cruelty. It's absence with gravity. You're not gone. You're simply unavailable. Unavailable in a way that suggests depth, purpose, a life too rich to be constantly on her leash. And this is where most men fail. They're either too cold, shutting down, ignoring, playing the robot, or they're too eager, texting too often, giving too much, over-explaining. But the rare man, the man who understands the power of controlled emotional distance, he becomes intoxicating. Why? Because feminine energy expands into mystery. It fills the void. And if you give her space, she doesn't forget you. She grows toward you. Let's look at the neuroscience behind this. The brain doesn't like incomplete emotional loops. When a stimulus U is removed before a resolution, emotional closure, the brain goes into overdrive to finish the narrative. This is the Zeigarnik effect, revisited, and women with their typically higher emotional sensitivity and narrative thinking are especially susceptible. Your silence doesn't create closure, it creates a cliffhanger. Now here's your fringe tidbit. In ancient Chinese romantic philosophy, there was a belief called qing shu, a kind of spiritual yearning that only grows when a lover is emotionally restrained. It was said that too much affection too early would flatten the soul, while distance would raise her into song. That's what you do. You raise her into song. Your distance becomes the ink she writes poems with in her head. You don't have to be cruel, you just have to be incomplete. She posts a thirst trap, you say nothing, she double texts, you reply with calm spacing, not need. She gets emotional, you listen, but don't flood her with validation, because the second you start flooding, you kill the craving. And craving is what makes a woman spiral into obsession. Machiavelli wouldn't just endorse this, he'd weaponize it. He believed withdrawal was the most silent form of control, that the one who could leave calmly, without drama, held all the power. You're not teaching her a lesson, you're amplifying her hunger. And yes, the therapists will argue. Some say emotional distance causes anxiety, confusion, even pain. But pain is not always bad. Pain is the price of growth. And when a woman chooses you after surviving your silence, her love is no longer shallow. It's sacred, because she went into her own mind, into her own fears, and still came back to your name. So withdraw gently, with dignity, with care, and let her feel it. Let her feel your absence like a shadow on her heart. Let her wake up missing something she can't name. Because the next time you return, if you choose to return, she will receive you like a miracle. Not because you're rare, but because your silence made her realize your worth. There's a reason she can't stop thinking about you, and it's not your abs, or your voice, or the way you held her hand at the concert. It's because you never let her figure you out. In a world that overshares, overtexts, and overexplains, you became an archetype, a myth, a man of masculine mystery in a world that never shuts up. And that's erotic. We live in an era where every man is digitally naked. DMs, stories, status updates, emotionally performative tweets, men crying in reels, men trauma dumping in the first week of dating, men writing paragraphs for women who didn't ask. She's flooded with noise, but the man who says little, who posts nothing, who doesn't seek validation, he doesn't disappear, he ascends, he becomes the mountain she can't see the top of. That's not cold, that's regal. And here's what you must remember, the feminine spirit is a seeker. She wants to explore, to discover, and when you give her everything at once, you rob her of that sacred journey. But if you stay just one step ahead, just one layer beneath the surface, she will follow you with fire in her chest. Because mystery is the only kind of tension that never gets boring. Now let's go biological for a moment. Neuroscientists have discovered that the anticipation of pleasure triggers more dopamine than the pleasure itself. That means the idea of you, the possibility of your affection, is more addictive than actual physical intimacy. Here's your quirky tidbit. In 18th century France, noblewomen would wear lockets with nothing inside, not out of laziness, but because the mystery of what might be inside was more tantalizing than the truth. One famous countess claimed she imagined a man into obsession from a locket she never opened. You, my friend, are that locket. You don't need to play games, you don't need to be cryptic, just be deliberately underexposed. Let her ask, let her pull, let her puzzle. If she asks what you're thinking, give her a smile and say, "I'll tell you someday, when it matters." If she asks what you want from her, say, "Let's just see what you reveal first." Those aren't evasions, those are open doors. And Machiavelli would applaud you. He knew that kings who revealed too much were easy to manipulate. But those who kept their intentions vague, they ruled with whispers, not decrees. And the scholars, they're split. Some call this emotional manipulation. Others say mystery is the natural balance to modern emotional chaos, because in a world that screams, you become a whisper, and whispers are always more seductive. So here's how you do it. Post less. Let your life be real, not broadcast. Speak with brevity. Let her fill in the meaning. Don't rush to define things. Let the bond evolve. When you're with her, be present, but don't unpack every emotion. Let her feel your presence more than she hears it. And most of all, be busy. Not fake busy. Not look at me busy. Actually be busy, creating, building, ascending. Because the man who's constantly available becomes predictable. And predictable men are emotionally beige. But the man she has to study, the one she has to decode, the one she feels but can't fully hold, he becomes legend. So embrace it. Be the mystery in a world of emojis. Be the sacred silence in her noise. Be the man who could explain everything but doesn't. Because the moment she knows all of you, the chase ends. But as long as she senses something beneath the surface, she will never stop diving. Now let's get tactical. You've heard it before. Just ignore her. But let's be honest, most men do it wrong. They disappear completely. Go cold, go blank, cut off all communication and think she'll come crawling back. What actually happens? She assumes you're immature, emotionally unavailable, or just not interested. She moves on. So here's the Machiavellian refinement. Ignore her, but with precision. Strategic indifference is an art form. It's not about absence. It's about controlled contrast, psychological light, and shadow. You don't ghost, you haunt. There's a difference. You appear when it matters, you vanish when she's expecting more. You show warmth, just enough to keep the fire alive, but never enough to satisfy her fully. She reaches out, don't reply instantly. Let it simmer, let the seed of uncertainty sprout. You're not playing games, you're retraining her nervous system. You are shifting from being emotionally convenient to becoming emotionally rare. Let's ground this in psychology. Behavioral economists call this scarcity principle. When something becomes less available, its perceived value rises. This isn't just marketing fluff. It's a fundamental truth of human desire. And with women, it's magnified. Why? Because high-value women are used to male attention. They swim in it. Compliments, DMs, emojis, phone calls. It's background noise. But when one man doesn't play, when one man doesn't orbit, he becomes memorable. He breaks the pattern. Now here's your fringe tidbit. In medieval Spain, noblemen practiced a strange courtship method called la sombra, the shadow. They'd attend gatherings where the woman they desired was present but would never approach or speak to her. They would simply be visible, then gone. The woman would become obsessed with the enigma. Who is he? Why won't he speak? What does he want? That's precision. So what does this look like in your life? You view her story, but never respond. You go out looking incredible and don't post it. You text her back with calm, brief interest, not excitement. You disappear on weekends, not to punish, but because you're building, training, living. Then maybe out of nowhere you send a message. Not flirty, not emotional, just something real. And suddenly you're not a man, you're a rhythm in her life. And she can't predict when the next beat drops. That unpredictability, that emotional tempo, it's seductive. Because the worst thing you can become is emotionally monotonous. Remember, feminine energy wants to feel something. And if you give her the same frequency, day after day, week after week, she becomes numb. But if you pulse, if you retreat and return, if you dim and burn, she stays alert, receptive, engaged. And yes, the psychologists will argue. Some say this borders on emotional unavailability. Others say it's the difference between masculine clarity and boyish need. Machiavelli would grin and say, "The man who gives no answer rules the conversation." So here's how to sharpen your indifference. Don't withhold out of fear, do it from fullness. Don't disappear as punishment, do it to create contrast. Don't ignore to manipulate, ignore to preserve gravity. Your time is sacred, your focus is sacred, your heart even more. So let her earn it, let her step forward, unsure if you'll step back. Let her overthink her tone, her texts, her timing, not because you're playing her, because you're showing her you are not a given, you are a gift. And when she finally drops the wall, when she sends the late night "I've been thinking about you" message, when she stops pretending she doesn't care, you don't rush in, you don't over-reward. You lean in slowly with calm eyes and a voice that says, "I know." And just like that, you're not ignoring her, you're initiating devotion. This is it. the moment she shatters, the moment she sends the long message finally admitting she's confused, that she misses you, that she doesn't understand what she did wrong, that she's tired of guessing, tired of chasing, tired of feeling like she's dancing with a ghost. This is the moment most men fall. They rush in with validation, they apologize, they over-explain, they try to fix what was never broken, but not you. When she finally breaks and you remain still, you become immortal. Because this is not the moment to fold, this is the moment to ascend. You see, when a woman reaches this point, she's no longer operating from curiosity. She's operating from surrender. She's no longer trying to figure you out. She's trying to prove she's worthy. And this is where you either crown her or continue the test. But here's what you must understand. If you comfort too quickly, you collapse the tension. If you validate too soon, you erase the mystery. If you rush in with warmth and clarity, you give her everything she's been craving, and she stops craving it the moment she has it. Because craving doesn't survive certainty. Let's anchor this in psychology, reward prediction error. It's the principle that the brain releases the most dopamine, not when a reward is given, but when it is unexpectedly withheld or delayed. When she expects relief and gets stillness instead, that's when obsession transforms into devotion. Now here's your quirky tidbit. In 12th century French courtly love traditions, knights would often delay intimacy for years. Letters were exchanged, tokens were worn, battles fought, but the knight held firm, offering loyalty without full emotional access. When the moment of surrender finally arrived, it was not a romantic event, it was a religious experience. That's what you are. You're not the guy who answers every text with enthusiasm. You're the man she whispers about when she's alone. You're the story she can't explain. And Machiavelli? He'd be silent now, because he knew power doesn't need applause. Power does not chase, it chooses. So when she breaks, when she finally leans in fully, vulnerable, unsure, open, you don't rush, you pause, you observe, you watch the tone, the consistency, the willingness to stay in the mystery. And if she's still trying to control it, still trying to define it, label it, lock it down, you remain still. But if she meets you in your stillness, if she whispers without demand, if she softens without collapsing, then and only then do you open your hand. Not your heart, your standard. You show her what you are, not through words but through presence, not through validation but through selection. And if she's the one, you'll know. Because she won't need to be told. She'll feel it in the way you look at her without trying, in the way you speak without needing, in the way your silence finally wraps her like a blanket, not a void, but a home. And if she's not, you stay still, because that's the final act of masculine mastery. You don't panic when she breaks, you watch, and in that moment, she either falls into your gravity or disappears into the storm that couldn't move you. Either way, you win. Now slow everything down. Let your heartbeat settle. Let the thoughts swirl like smoke across still water. You've walked through fire tonight, not the kind that burns, but the kind that refines, the kind that purges the neediness from your soul. That breaks the compulsion to chase, to prove, to perform. You're not that man anymore. You are the stillness in a world addicted to noise. You are the cliff's edge, the place she comes to stare, to feel small, to feel wonder. And whether she stays or not, you don't move, because now you understand you are not meant to be chased. You are meant to be discovered, bit by bit, layer by layer, by the one worthy of knowing you. So breathe deep, sink into your pillow. Let the silence carry you. And the next time she wonders where you've gone, or why your stillness makes her ache, just smile, because she was never chasing a man. She was chasing the echo of your absence.